It's time to start panel number 2. I hope that nobody's waiting outside because everybody's already in here. Are we good?
Yeah.
Just poke your head out there, make sure nobody's awkwardly standing outside. Let's get started, everybody. So welcome welcome back to the Webcomics panel. It's me, your friend Star, here to yell at you about comics some more. If you're not tired of my voice yet, thank you. So this is Webcomics 102, part 2 of my Webcomics panel, because I can't talk about everything in 1 hour, I found out recently. From self-promotion to self-publishing. So this is less talking about the actual drawing the comics part and more about the behind-the-scenes part. How to get people to read your comic, how to make your comic pay for your burrito addiction, etc., etc. That's a joke from the first panel. If you weren't here, you missed my burrito talk. Anyway, so, very quick intro again. What panel is this? Webcomics 102, designed for folks who want to make a webcomic or those who already have a one and want to learn more about what to do next. What's a webcomic? It's a comic you can read online. They're very popular. You should read them. You should also read mine, because who are you? I'm Star. I'm the writer and artist of a comic called Cast Off, and there it is again. So this is my shameless self-promotion slide. I'm sorry if this is deja vu, but some people may just only be coming to this panel, so I gotta do it again. This is my comic. This is my sad boy. This is my woman who can kick my ass, and this is my happy like cinnamon roll. And they all work together to accomplish nothing. And then also, this is my Spider Forest webcomic collective. We are a community of webcomic artists who help each other self-promote and work on their comics. It's good beans, and we have application season once a year. If you have a comic, please consider joining us, because we are cool. Okay, so now you've got a webcomic, or at least the idea of how to make your webcomic, because you came to my first panel. So that's awesome. You did the thing. You're incredible. Welcome to the world of webcomics. Now that your comic is available for people to read, I bet you want people to read your comic, right?
No.
Yeah, let's talk about that. All right. So, making it big, growing your comics fan base, a how-to by yours truly. So, promoting is the business side of comic. This is the side of comics that a lot of people don't like to do, but it's important if you want people to actually read the thing you spend so much time on. So if you want to get the word out about your comic, you have to promote it. This means attracting new readers and getting new eyes on your OCs. There's lots of different ways to promote your comic. Let's talk about those. So the easiest thing you can do right now is put your website out on free comic listing sites. So these are sites that compile information about webcomics so users can manage comics they read and use that to find new ones. So if your comic has a homepage on one of these aggregate sites, they might be able to find your comic as well. Top Webcomics is the big dog here. So if you've ever read a comic and they said, hey, there's a vote incentive on Top Webcomics, this is the site they're talking about. So Top Webcomics is a ranking site. So each comic will have an entry on it, and it's kind of like a paywall, but it's a vote wall. So somebody will put like, hey, I put the sketch and work in progress stuff for this page on Top Webcomics. So if you vote for my comic, then you can see it. And usually it just like requires you to press a button. But then the more votes they get, the higher they go up on the page rankings, and then that gets more people interested in their comics, so it's a mutual relationship. People who vote get to see bonus stuff, the people who make the comics get more eyes on their work. And the votes get reset monthly, so usually there's a big push for this right at the beginning of the month. And also, it's free to make a listing there. All you need is a URL in your banner. Comic Rocket is actually a comic reading site. So you can like track and favorite and mark your place on like all the comics you read across all these different websites. A lot of people I know use it, but the cool part about Comic Rocket is when people are using Comic Rocket, you still get the views on your website. So it's not like they're posting your pages to their own site. You're just seeing the site with their little banner at the top so they can keep track of what you're reading. The Belfry Comic Index, the Webcomic List, and Hypercut are all a little bit less popular. These are just like webcomic listing sites. Usually they'll like be separated out by genre, or they'll like be bumped to the top if they updated recently. And so this is like a place that some people will go to find new comics. Again, it's free. All you have to do is put your comics data in there and just let it run itself. Highly recommend this as your first step. Mirror sites. So different people read comics on different websites. So some people will only ever read your comic on your main site, but other people who read a lot of comics may prefer to stick to a website like Webtoons or Tapastic, or now Tapas, I forgot to change that. They rebranded recently. So these comic sites have built-in audiences, because if somebody has an account on Webtoons or an account on Tapas, they are there to read comics. They like reading comics, and if you put your comic on there, they might find it and they might read it, and that's good because that's more people reading your comic. So the idea with a mirror site is that you have your main website or you have your main hub, but then you can also post your same comic on multiple different websites to access all of those different built-in audiences for each site. Because some people will only ever use Tapastic, so if you want to get their eyes on your comic, you gotta post on Tapastic. A lot of people are the same with Webtoons. If you want to get the Webtoons audience, you gotta post on Webtoons. It's a little bit more work because you have to post the same thing on multiple sites, but it's good if you want to kind of get your comic out there more. So this is the same slide I showed earlier, but these are some other sites you can consider hosting your comic on if you want access to that potential audience. So Comic Genesis, Smack Jeeves, DeviantArt, Tapastic is now Tapas, but they named it after a food for some reason, it's dumb. So I still call it Tapastic. Webtoon is a really popular one right now. Tumblr is but it still works. And then Comic Fury and Smack Jeeves are really similar. They kind of let you make your own little website, but it's hosted by them. So it's not quite as free, but it's still free. Fan art and link exchanges. So if a comic you love has a fan art gallery, which a lot of them do, and you are also an artist with a webcomic, consider drawing them fan art, because many webcomics will have a fan art gallery, and if you have your work in there and people who read that comic like your art style might go digging. I know I personally have found a lot of webcomics I like to read just because I saw somebody's fan art on another comic page. I was like, hell yeah, I want to read that. On the same note, if a comic offers link exchanges, displaying their banner on your website and vice versa will help attract new readers to both comics. So a lot of times this is just like, you don't really talk about it. So I just have a list of all the comics that I read on my website. If somebody wants to return the favor, they can do that, but I never expect anyone to. But there's also link exchanges where it's a little more formal. You can email a comic creator and say, hey, I like your webcomic. If I post your banner on my website, on my links page, will you do the same for me? And then we can help each other. And sometimes they might ghost you, but sometimes they'll say yes, and then you have access to their audience by way of just kind of background radiation. So neither of these options are foolproof. It's going to be very dependent on the person you are talking to and what creator, what their attitude towards that is. But if you are polite and lucky, it can work out in your favor and you can get a lot of help from it. Just don't be that guy who says, I drew your fan art, so now you have to advertise my comic for me. Don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy. And y'all, the comics community is tiny. If you are rude to one webcomic artist, everyone will hear about it within 24 hours, I guarantee it. So be nice to people. Don't curse somebody out for not posting your art on their website. Because sometimes I get fan art occasionally and sometimes I'll just forget. And so people have to remind me. It's like, hey, did you see that art that I posted of your sad boy? And I'm like, oh my God, I saw this and I forgot to post it, I'm sorry. But if somebody came to me and was like, hey, I drew your sad boy, why didn't you ever post it on your website? I'm like, thank you for the sad boy, but you're kind of a butt. Okay, advertising, everyone's favorite career path. So buying ad space on other websites can be a great way to reach new audiences and find new readers. You can buy ad space on webcomic listing sites, which is good for reaching a wide variety of users, or you can use ad services like Google AdSense. Also, rest in pieces for Project Wonderful, which was the main advertising service that most webcomic people used, and then it exploded a couple of years ago. Rest in pepperonis. So this is the new hotness on the block right now. This is Comic Ad Network. It's still a very, very, very baby site. It's only been around for 2 months. But this is kind of an advertising, what's the word I'm looking for? Aggregate is not the right word, but basically an advertising hub specifically for webcomics. So you can put ad space on your comic website and then people will bid to put their ad there, and it's only for webcomics. And then by the same token, you can buy ad space on other people's websites. And for a lot of things, it's like chucking pennies at your computer monitor. It's very, very low maintenance depending on how you set it up, and it's not a big cash grab if you just kind of feed it a little bit. The one I've had the most success with was actually Top Webcomics. They do daily sponsorships where it's like $1 a day to have your ad on the small ad on the front page. I ran that for about a month and I got a lot of new readers from it. It does cost money, but most things do. So if you're able to put aside like $5 a month to spend on advertising your webcomic, it's a decent investment that I would recommend. Social media, my favorite topic. I am currently working on a whole panel just about social media for internet creators. It's not at this con, maybe at IkiCon, we'll see. I got rejected from this con for that one, but it's fine because I didn't finish it, so it's fine. Using social media is a fantastic way to spread the word about your comic. There are dozens of webcomic communities around the internet, all with different focuses and ways to connect your audience and other creators. So Instagram, not just for food pics. So the pros and cons of Instagram. Pros, it's a great venue for posting art and comics. There are so many artists on Instagram. I follow like 300 and I'm constantly finding more, and then I get sad because Instagram, like the more people you follow, the less you see, and I'm like, no, show me all the sad boys, dang it. It's got a really big community. It is really easy to find other artists, and by the same token, easy for other people to find you. You can use up to 30 hashtags per post, and they are generally effective depending on which hashtag you use. I don't have time to go into it, but look up how to use hashtags effectively. It will get you a lot more attention. Sorry, microphone. You can use up to 10 photos per post. A lot of people who post their comics on Instagram do gag-a-day strips, because then you can make each photo post, or like each post is a panel, and then you can just swipe through to see the next panel. I know a lot of people who got really famous on Instagram because they use that exact format, because each comic strip is an individual thing. You don't require context to understand it, and you can just swipe through to see the whole comic, and people on the internet like to swipe things. So it's like, oh boy, I can swipe this, and then I can keep reading it. Yay, comics! It's a good format if you do that. Cons, the algorithm keeps changing, and it's very annoying to keep having to try and fight the algorithm. So sometimes people won't see what you post. There's ways around it. I can't go into it right now, but maybe someday. You can only see the pictures one at a time. So unfortunately, like if you do the swipe method, people will only see your first panel, so your first panel has to be good enough to get them to swipe through it. There's no built-in sharing method. So like things like Tumblr and Twitter have like reshares and retweets and all that, so it's easy for your work to get around. Instagram, you just kind of have to rely on your own ability to post things well, so that it means that stuff doesn't get spread around so much. And also you can't put hyperlinks in posts, so if you have your own website, you have to say, you can't just post it in the description under your picture. You have to say, go to my profile and then click on the link, and then that will take you to my website. But here's the thing, people on the internet don't like to click stuff. The more steps it takes for you to get them to do things, the less likely they are to do it. So if it takes me 3 steps to get to your webcomic, I'm probably not going to do it, because I'm an internet user and I get bored very quickly and also easily distracted. So basically, Instagram is not great for redirecting people to your comic website, but it's still good for posting stuff, and it's kind of the biggest art community right now, so it's worth pursuing somewhat. I figured out a way to make Instagram work for me. I will talk about it after the panel if anyone is interested. Twitter, the birds and the memes. So Twitter is good for conversations with fellow creators because it's mostly a talky website. You can post hyperlinks, which is good. So if you want to redirect people to your comic site, it's right there and it's 1 click away. So lazy internet users have no excuse. You can post up to 4 photos in one post. Sometimes they get cropped a little weird and it just like crops on boobies, but that's an art problem. That's a Twitter problem. Sometimes you have to deal with that. And then posts can be spread around very easily by people liking and then retweeting it. If you don't know what that means, it's basically like sharing on Facebook. It's like, I like this, and now I will show it to all the people who follow me. It's like, hey everybody, retweet, look at this picture of boobies. And they're like, oh, those are good boobies. And then maybe other people will share it. I don't know why I'm talking about boobs today. I just have anime convention on my brain. I'm seen so many big titty anime girls this weekend, y'all. Okay. There's so many figures in the village. I'm like, whoa. Okay, cons for Twitter. There is a 280 character limit, so you can't tell your whole life story in a single tweet, which is probably good, but it forces you to be brief. Hashtags are kind of useless on Twitter because no one really uses them. On Instagram, people will actively search for hashtags of more stuff they want to see. On Twitter, it's just like kind of worthless because people don't do that on Twitter. They rely on retweets and people sharing other things to get around. And also, yeah, I mentioned this, sometimes it crops your picture weird. So that's not great for illustrations, but what are you gonna do?
It even crops out the, it's not that, it also compresses the image from a PNG to JPEG.
Yes, so sometimes your pictures look a little bit crunchy, but it's fine. Tumblr, it still exists, I guess. So Tumblr's kind of dying, but it still has a surprisingly dedicated fan base, especially if you want to adventures on fan art like yours, really cough. Anyway, so you can post up to 10 images at once, which is good for like longer comics, but also standalone. So if you have just like a really long 10-page comic, you can post it all at once and then just make people scroll by it. And while they're trying to scroll past it, they're like, oh wait, this is actually interesting. I'm gonna go back to the top and read it now. It doesn't crop images unless you kind of post it weird. Typically, if you're just posting one picture at a time, it's not gonna crop them at all. It might compress them depending on how you save your files, but that's something you can kind of work around. It does have hyperlinks and also text formatting, which Twitter doesn't have. So if you want to make rainbow hyperlinks, you can do that. And also, reblogs are like retweets, so that can keep posts circulating without too much input. I get tons of notes on Tumblr all the time, and I haven't posted there in months. It's just people like sharing my dumb Adventure Zone comics. Cons. It is difficult to talk to others, and somehow the site has been around for like 10 years and they haven't figured it out yet. Scheduling posts is annoying because you can't use third-party apps, which I will talk about in a hot second. Anything you schedule on Tumblr, you gotta go in and manually do it yourself. It is a little broken, it's a little wacky, it's fine, guess. It's about to get sold again probably, and who knows what's gonna happen. It did? Oh, yeah, they went through with it?
Yeah, 1.3.
$3 million.
That's so much less than it was originally. Oh. They scared off all the users. Oh, Tumblr.
They're not fixing it either.
Oh my god. Yeah, so the next bullet point, dying a painful death. But sometimes people still post things there, so it's like, you know, whatever, maybe. Okay, but yeah, so social media, why should you care? Because followers on social media are generally going to be people who like the stuff you make, whether it's your art or your shit posts, whatever. It's people who like you are going to follow you, and if they follow you because they like what you make, they will probably be interested in your webcomic. So you just gotta get them to read them. So not everyone who follows you online will become a fan of your comic, but it's still a good investment of your time. So how the heck do I get followers, and how do I get them to read my comic? Engage. Let's talk about engagement. I'm allowed one meme per PowerPoint. So engagement is a fancy advertising way of saying interaction. So liking, commenting, retweeting, reblogging, sharing, etc., etc., etc. People who interact with the things you are posting online. If you want people to engage with what you're making, sometimes you gotta go out and engage with them first. So my tips for this is talk to people and be friendly without the expectation of getting something in return. Be genuine. Don't be in it for your ulterior motives. What I like to do on Instagram is I will just go through the hashtag of whatever video game I'm playing right now. So right now it's Fire Emblem. So I'll just like go through the hashtag and I'll look for fan art I like. And if I like fan art, I'll like it. Or I'll give them a comment. It's like, you drew my sad boy so good. And they'll be like, thank you. And so it's fun to just kind of like go through and interact with people. It's especially easy on websites with likes. So like Twitter and Instagram, you can just go through and like something. And that little heart will mean a lot to somebody, you don't know. So here's a case study for you guys, because I have spent too much time researching social media because I find it fascinating and aggravating at the same time. So I have two separate Instagram accounts. I have one for cosplay and I have one for art. So on my cosplay account, I post daily and I use a whole bunch of different hashtags. But I very, very seldom actually spend any time interacting with people on that account. I don't really like or comment on other people's photos because I have a personal account for that. I have 4 Instagram accounts, don't at me. So I basically post and run. I don't do any real engagement with the people who follow me, aside from maybe replying to their comments if they commented on one of my posts. So after about 6 months, I had about 300 followers. And that's not bad, but considering most of them came from my art account, it's like, iffy. On my art account, I post daily and use the same variety of hashtags. I pretty much do the exact same thing as my cosplay account, but I also regularly like and comment on other people's art posts. I sometimes feature other artists on my account, like in my Instagram story or just like on my profile. Like, hey, I found this cool artist, go follow them. I've done art giveaways, and I reply to all the comments that I can. Even if it's just like liking the comment, I will always make sure that I show you that I saw you. So this PowerPoint is old. I'm at 16,000 followers right now after about 2 years. Interaction will get you a lot of places. So I definitely recommend engaging with other people first. Go be friendly on the internet and people will like you. So here's my hot tip, social media for the busy webcomic person. Ideally, you should post it in social media once a day. That's the ideal. If you can't post finished pieces, a lot of people, especially on Instagram, really like seeing work in progress. What I like to do is, since I draw my webcomic all the time, I just post panels, like isolated panels from my webcomic and say like, I really like how this sad boy turned out. Look at him, look at my son. By the way, go read my comic, here's a link. And so that can help kind of pad out your feed so you're still posting something once a day. Social media can be really time consuming, so I recommend using apps that will help you schedule your posts ahead of time. They're really good tools. So this is my shill. I'm not getting paid to say this, I just really like the service. So Later.com it's a social media scheduler. You can hook it up to multiple social media accounts at the same time. So for mine, it's hooked up to my Twitter, it's hooked up to my Instagram, it's hooked up to my Pinterest. And so and also Facebook, but I don't use Facebook that much. So you can post something, you can schedule it to post on Later, and then when it's time for that post to go, it will auto-post to all those websites simultaneously. It has a drag and drop calendar, so if you're not good at like typing in numbers to schedule things, you just kind of click and drop it. It will automatically post things, so if you want to post things at a weird time when you know you're going to be busy during the day, like I always post something around 5 p.m. every day. I'm usually driving home at that point, but the software will post it for me. It's not software, it's all in browser, you don't have to download anything. And also it can save captions. So if you're going to use a lot of the same hashtags repeatedly, you can just type it in and say save this block of hashtags, and then you can just click a button, it will automatically add it to your posts. It's extremely helpful, it has saved me hours, it's my favorite thing. I highly recommend it. They better pay me for this, all this free advertising I'm giving them. Okay, so basic guidelines for promoting your comic. Don't annoy people constantly to read your work. You will reek of desperation. Let them come to you. So there's kind of a balancing act you have to play here. Because if you don't ever talk about your webcomic, people aren't going to know that you have a webcomic. So you want to talk about your comic a little bit. But you don't want to be like constantly banging down people's doors, being like, yo, have you read my comic yet? Yo, have you read my comic yet? Hey, have you guys read my comic yet? That's annoying. I don't like myself when I'm like that. So just promote yourself, but be kind of low-key and chill about it. Like, hey, I posted a new comic page today. It would mean a lot if you read it. Not, go read my comic or you're not my friend anymore. That's not cool. Don't try to become friends with someone just so they'll check out your comic and or draw you fan art. Speaking from experience, is bad. Don't try to be friends with people for ulterior motives of getting something. That's just a douchey move in general, and nobody likes it. Also, yes, leading into that, don't be a jerk. The comics community is smaller than you'd think, and word gets around fast. So if you are kind of a butthole to like one artist, chances are that word will get around, and people will preemptively block you from commenting on their websites. I have done that before. Try to post once a day when people are awake is important. I have a friend who is basically nocturnal, and she exclusively posts things at 3 a.m. And I'm like, my friend, my dude, you're promoting really good to the Australians right now, but they're probably not gonna come see you at cons. They're a little far away. Do help promote others. If you've got a platform helping to kind of push your friends' webcomics, they might do the same back for you. Like, don't be selfish, don't be in it just for you. Like, help other people out when you can. I highly recommend it. It's good vibes all around. And also, do be sincere and enthusiastic. I love webcomics and I want to read webcomics. So seeing other people get excited about my comic and then I can get excited about their comics, it's fun, it's a community, we all help each other, we both cry about our sad boys. So this is the value of self-promotion. This is a poll I ran on Castoff's website a couple of years ago. How did you find the comic? So I hosted this poll for 1 week just to see what people would say. So my top choice here was links page or promotion from another webcomic. So this is a friend shouting me out. This is a cross-promotion week on Spider Forest community. This is like the links page, or maybe I did fan art for another comic. This is somebody who I like posted my comic on their website and I kind of absorbed some of their readers. And that is 31% of the people who voted in this poll. That's like a third. That's a lot. That's several. Tapastic, at the time I ran this poll, I was using Tapastic as a mirror site. So I was also posting my comic on Tapastic. And a lot of people found me through there. Webtoons is also in here, but I didn't use it as much. I used Webtoons right before it exploded, and then they kind of screwed me over. I'll talk about that later, but I'm just annoyed at Webtoons and I don't like to use them anymore. Top Webcomics is that comic listing site I talked about. That's 10%. That's 42 people who would not have found my comic otherwise. And that may seem like it's not a lot in the big scale of things, but there's like 40-something people on this half of the room, and that's like all individual people who might go tell their friends to read a cool comic that they found online. The word spreads, gets some cool readers. 9% from social media. Again, that's like 41 people because I screamed about my comic on Twitter and or Instagram. The Spider Forest website cross-promotion banner is like 63 people. So just from being in that community and engaging with that community of other webcomic peoples, that's where I got 63 of my readers from. Anything you can do to promote your comic. If it gets one more person to read it, it's worth doing. That's my bottom line, is because that is then one reader who could go tell their friends, and then their friends tell their friends. But that's like a group of people you would never have accessed if you did not pursue this one opportunity. So I take every chance you can get, promote your webcomic, but just be chill about it. Be friendly, be honest, be excited about the things that you're making, and people will be naturally drawn to that positive energy. Let's talk about dollar bills. So this is making it rain, earning cha-ching money with your webcomic. This is, I think, what a lot of people want to talk about. If we're going to talk about money in comics, we need to talk about Patreon. And we all knew this was coming. Okay, I'm actually genuinely curious. Does anybody in this room not know what Patreon is? Cool, I don't have to spend that much time explaining it. But the basics of Patreon is that it's a monthly subscription service like Netflix for internet creators. But it's a little more different. For a certain amount each month, donors or patrons can access exclusive content from creators. How much patrons pay is dependent on the person, and the rewards they get are decided by the creators, like the paywall perks. If you have an audience, it's a good way for them to help support your project. Notice the wording of that sentence. If you have an audience. Patreon is useless if no one reads your comic. Patreon is most effective for creators with an established fan base already. Realistically, less than 1% of your readers and fans will be willing to financially support you. This makes Patreon less viable for people with smaller audience or people who are just starting out. Because if you have 100 readers, maybe one of them will chuck $1 at you every month. And you can't pay rent with $1. You can maybe like buy some lettuce to sprinkle on top of your burrito that doesn't exist because you can't pay for it. But you know what? That $1 means something. This is why promotion is important. This is why you want to promote yourself. This is why I just spent like 30 minutes talking about promoting your comic on social media and stuff. Because the more you build your audience and the more you build a positive rapport with your readers, the more likely they are to trust you and then support you with that cash money dollars. So how do I build a rapport with my audience? Be consistent. Prove that you can update your comic regularly and not miss too many updates. So let's put it this way. If you guys are like paying for, I don't know, an internet provider or a cable provider or something, if their service is out 50% of the time, are you gonna wanna pay money for that? No, you're gonna switch to somebody else. So you wanna be reliable. People wanna know that when they're paying for something, they're gonna get what they're paying for. Even if though Patreon is technically donations, if you can't prove that you're like actually gonna give people what they expect when they give you money, then they're not gonna wanna support you. Communicate. If for whatever reason you do have to miss an update, you do have to do something, you have to miss, like I'm on vacation or my family is dying, I have to not work on my comic for a little bit, just let people know. I talked about this in my previous panel, just be honest with your readers and they will appreciate your honesty, they will understand where you are coming from, life comes first. And be reliable. If you promise something, for example, Patreon rewards, be sure to deliver on that promise. So basically, don't commit yourself to something you can't do reliably. This all boils down to have good customer service. Like these people are throwing a couple dollars a month at you, like treat that with respect. So if we're talking about Patreon, let's talk about Patreon rewards. So generally people on Patreon will have tiers. So like if you pay me $1 a month, you get this reward. If you pay me $5 a month, you get this reward. If you pay me $100 a month, you'll get this badass thing. So if you want to talk about what your rewards should be, I've been on Patreon for like 3 years, and so this is all coming from my personal experience. The best Patreon rewards are things that you are already doing. Ideally, rewards should not be extra work on top of, you're already making a comic. That's so much work. Why would you do more than that? And I'm a workaholic. I almost said I'm an alcoholic. I'm not. I'm a workaholic. It's different. I don't even drink. So it's a weird thing for me to say. But yeah, so like you're already working your butt off making this comic. Why would you add more things on top of that? I tried that. It sucked, so I don't do it anymore. So for comics specifically, the most common reward is things like early access to pages, work in progress, and behind the scenes stuff. Basically things you wouldn't normally post, but because these people are investing their money into you, they get to see a little extra. That sounded sexy and I didn't mean it to. It's like, yeah, you want to see the sketch of this page? Here you go. Like that sketch? It's very messy. So how much should I charge? So think about how much you would be willing to pay for certain rewards. If you wouldn't pay $10 a month for something, your audience probably won't either. So you should really have realistic expectations for what you want people to pay. Average for things like webcomics. So what I do personally is my $1 tier is like all my behind the scenes stuff. So I do Progress Monday blogs, which is every Monday I will go through and show like some isolated like sad boy faces that are works in progress. And like, here's a sad boy, here's my angry girl, and I'm not gonna show you the context of these panels because these pages aren't coming out for 2 months, but shh, it's a secret. And you guys get to see it before it's finished being colored. My $5 tier is what gets you early access. So I post pages a week in advance for people who do $5 a month. And then I have a special Discord channel for the early access people to kind of talk and then yell at me for putting cliffhangers every single page. Sorry, not sorry. So it's just kind of like, how much are you willing to pay? How much is your audience willing to pay? And is it worth that reward level? A lot of people who subscribe on Patreon just want to support you, and that's fine. Like, that's their choice. I support a lot of people who I just really like their stuff, and I don't care how much it costs, I just want more sad boys. But a lot of people, it's like, I'm giving you money because I want to see this resource that you are putting out. So it's kind of a tough balance, and you might have to tweak it a little bit, but as long as you're being open with people about what you can realistically do, and if you're gonna change things, let them know. If you wanna try something different, just be open with your people. because honesty is the best policy. Oh, I already talked about this, oops, but yeah, so these are common webcomic Patreon rewards. $1 is I like your stuff, but I'm not made of money. This is the tip jar. So this is your very basic, simple to put together rewards that you can do without too much extra effort. Mine is just like the background radiation of making comics. It's like, here's the sketches, here's a really stupid reference picture I took of me compared to the final drawing, yay! I take reference pictures of like every single panel I draw these days, so my iPad is just filled with like dumb pictures of me doing this at a weird angle. It's embarrassing, and I will post those someday, but only for Patreon because I don't want to post those on Twitter. $3 to $5 is I really like your stuff, but I'm also not made of money. So this is things like early access to comic pages, more in-depth behind the scenes. Sometimes people do tutorials, things like that. $10 and higher is capital G, capital S, the good stuff. So these are things like monthly sketch requests, inked and colored monthly requests for higher tiers. I used to do this. I kind of paused it for a while because it got to be too much work, but I had a $15 tier that was I'll sketch something for you every month, and then a $50 tier, which is I will draw something like a full illustration for you every month. I say illustration, it's like a character drawing. I will draw you a waist-up character every month. It got to be too much work, so I had to pause it, and also it was kind of annoying to chase people around to get the requests every month. But if that's something that you're interested in doing, I would recommend doing it very limited to start. Like I had one fully inked character portrait every month and then like 3 sketches. And so just be cautious about how much extra work you're taking on if you're doing custom stuff. Setting goals. So Patreon lets you do goal amounts that you can hit, like thresholds. Like if we hit $10 a month, I can do this. At $100 a month, I can do this. So when you're first starting, set some small, easy to reach goals and slowly work your way up. So like $10 a month, that will easily cover your website hosting costs for the year. The best goal is something you only have to do once. And this is something I learned the hard way. When I was really, really early in Patreon, I was like, when we hit $50 a month, I will do a high-res wallpaper image every single month. I couldn't do it, it was too much. And so then I had to rework my tiers. I'm like, y'all, I'm sorry, I can't do it. But now what I do instead is I put out as many like wallpapers as I can make with whatever other art that I drew that month. If I have a really nice, like high quality panel that I think would make a good desktop wallpaper, I'll make that into a wallpaper at the end of the month. And maybe I drew a cute picture of a sad boy. I'll just like slap a background on it and make that a wallpaper. But I don't go out of my way to do it. It's just like kind of the background radiation of stuff I was already doing. So a new bonus comic, a process video, etc. is something that you only have to do once. So like if we hit this threshold, I will make a video walking you guys through how I do all of my comic pages. Or if we hit this goal, I will do this thing and I will do it once. Adding more monthly rewards as a funding goal is very tempting, but it's extremely easy to overdo. Speaking from experience, take it easy. Don't promise something that you can't reliably do. If you make promises you can't keep, you'll just end up disappointing your fans, and then that's not what you want to do. That's bad. General Patreon tips. Promote your Patreon. Same rules as promoting your webcomic. Be chill about it, don't be up in people's faces about it, but also just make sure to let them know frequently enough and easily enough that if they do want to support you, the option is not something they have to dig for. I have like a link to my Patreon at the top of my webcomic. It's like right there. So if anyone is on my website, they know where to go. Look at successful campaigns and use them for inspiration. If you have a comic you really like and they are really successful on Patreon, maybe chuck them a couple bucks and then steal their ideas. Like a lot of people on webcomics kind of do the same things, but if you want, it's like, I really like how you structure your Patreon, so I'm gonna kind of study what you did and see if I can apply anything for mine. So like there's some stuff that I want to do. I personally will be starting a like postcard mail club for my comic soon, because that's something I think would be a lot of fun. I know a lot of other webcomic artists who have a lot of success with it. We'll see if I can manage to keep it up, but I also don't have a full-time job right now, so woohoo, freelance. And then do have a link to your Patreon on your comics website. Make it easy to find for people who want to support you. I already said that, it's important, so I say it again. Don't promise more than you can do. Don't set your expectations too high. Don't expect that you are going to be making $1,000 a month in your first month on Patreon. It's not realistic. You will disappoint yourself. Set realistic expectations. How many people read your webcomic? How much can you expect them to do? Some people have just money and they want to throw it everywhere. Most of your readers are not going to be those people. Be appreciative of the ones that are, but don't expect that from everyone. And also, don't constantly spam people. Being annoying will drive people away. There's a fine balance between too much and not enough, and that's just going to take experimentation on your part. I can't give you all the answers. You got to work for it a little bit, but just practice, try it, do stuff. I really quickly want to talk about coffee, the internet's tip jar. I hear a lot of people call it Ko-Fi. That's not what it's called. It's coffee.
I didn't say coffee mug ever.
No, it's coffee. It's a little coffee mug. It's right there. I was listening to a podcast about comics and they were ripping on coffee. And I'm like, they said it Ko-Fi. They said, it sounds like a weird startup. I'm like, shit. Stupid comics people. Okay, so coffee is basically, like I said, it's a tip jar. So it is a single-time alternative to Patreon. Patreon is you set up your pledge and then it gets withdrawn from your account every month. Coffee is just make it rain. I will give you $3, woo! And then you don't have to do it again if you don't want to. Suppose small donations of $3 each. You can buy multiple at once. So the idea is that $3 is enough to buy a cup of coffee if you're not going to Starbucks. And so it's like, here, I like your comic, or I like your art, or I like whatever else you do. Go get yourself a hot drink, because I like you. There's no fees, but it works through PayPal, so PayPal does have fees. That's another thing about Patreon, is they take like 5% of your earnings, like 5 to 8%. So it kind of sucks. I'm trying to move away from Patreon. But coffee, if you can make it work, it only has PayPal fees, which is nice because the website actually doesn't take any fees from you, which is very nice. Coffee Gold is their new premium model. It's only been around for about a year, I think. It has a monthly subscription cost. It's like $6 a month, but it allows people to pledge to you like Patreon and then just do recurring automatic monthly payments. That one's a little bit less popular, but if coffee is something that works for you, that might be something worth pursuing. They also opened up, now you can take commissions just through coffee, and it's pretty cool. I'm not gonna go into it right now, but if you take commissions, that might be something worth looking into. Alternative money-making methods for comic creators and artists. Some comic creators have a tip jar link to their PayPal, so people can click on the link, set how much they want to donate, and it's way more flexible than coffee, but it also might take a little bit more convincing because people are just like, I don't know how much money to give this rando on the internet. Selling merchandise on sites like Redbubble can help earn passive income. Passive income is my favorite set of words because it means making money without doing anything. So what Redbubble does is it's mostly a t-shirt website, but you can also sell things like stickers and wall art and all this other nonsense, coffee mugs. If you just supply the design, and then when someone buys it, they will print and ship it for you. They take a pretty decent cut of the profit because they have to use it to pay for the materials to make it, but you literally do not have to do anything. I have a couple of sticker designs and t-shirt designs on Redbubble, and I earn like 15 bucks a month from it, which will buy me a burrito and a half at Chipotle. So, Drip, actually, ignore this sentence. I forgot to take that out. Drip exploded, and I guess they're not going to do it anymore. So that's out. That was going to be a Patreon alternative that everyone got excited for, and then I guess they got bought, and then everyone quit, and they're just like, we're not going to do this anymore. You can also, if you have enough pages to do this, you can sell physical copies of your webcomics, which leads us into making it real, self-publishing and printing your comic. The dream for many of us. So let's talk about getting your comic printed. More and more webcomic creators are self-publishing their comics. With resources like Kickstarter and hundreds of printers for small and large runs of books, it's easier than ever to get your own comic in print and have a physical book to look at and smooch when you're tired. It's like, oh, I love you, I spent so many hours on you and it was worth it. So let's talk about how you do that. I don't kiss my books. I think about it, but I don't. So getting your comic printed. The type of printing you choose will affect how much money you need. So these are your two options right now. So digital printing is like printing with inkjet printers like the kind you might have at home. So it's just like you print one page at a time, and then they put them all together, and it's good. That's not entirely accurate. I'm just trying to keep it simple. This is better for smaller runs of books, like 250 copies or fewer. Individual books can be more expensive. Typically, the more you buy, the cheaper per unit it is. I did digital printing for my first webcomic when I ran a Kickstarter. I printed like 50 books, and I think it was about $7 each for an 80-page graphic novel, which is not bad. I can still sell that book for like 15 bucks and make like $7 a book off it. It's not a great profit margin, but it's decent if you just want to print like a small issue of your comic. If you want to play with the big boys, you got to go to offset printing, because this is where you're going to be buying books for like $2 to $3 each, but you got to order thousands at a time. This is your mass production cost. So this is printed with color plates. So if anyone's familiar with like digital printing and CMYK, you've got your 4 colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And so they'll have a big metal plate for each color of your comic, and then a big machine will go, and then the next one, until you have your full color comic. And it's more easy to mass produce comic pages like that, but in order for it to be cost effective, most places have a minimum of like 500 books, and it doesn't really get more cost effective unless you order more than 1,000. So these are expensive. The individual books are very cheap, but because they have to make those big metal plates, that costs a lot of money, so the total cost can be in the thousands and thousands of dollars. Since printing comics is expensive, most creators turn to crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo to fund their comics, unless you're just rich and you have a few $1,000s laying around. So let's talk about crowdfunding. I could do a whole panel about Kickstarter, but we have 12 minutes, so I don't have time. So I'm just going to cover the very basics, and I'm going to tell you guys where you can get more information on this when you're ready for that. A good starting point is to look at other comic Kickstarters and learn from them. If they succeeded, what did they do well? And also worth looking at, if it crashed and burned, what can you learn from that? What can you do better than them? What went wrong? And what will you not do when you do your comic Kickstarter? So try to find comics with a similar sized fan base to yours. And this is important because if you're Tiny Small Potatoes comics over here, and you have like 500 readers, you don't want to set your expectation to somebody who has 50,000 readers. That's just setting yourself up for disappointment. So find somebody with a similar size readership to yours, and this can give you an idea of what to expect. So start small. Keep it basic and don't go overboard with extras. I would recommend starting with like just the book. This is a Kickstarter for just book printing, and the only rewards are you're gonna get the book. Maybe a digital copy of the book also, because that's free and that doesn't require shipping. The more things you add, the more rewards, like, oh, I'm gonna do a keychain and stickers and an acrylic stand, and I'm gonna fly somebody out to Las Vegas to party with me for a weekend if they pay me $10,000. The more stuff you add to it, the more you gotta worry about, and the higher the margin for error is. Figure out your budget, very important. When you're dealing with money, you gotta be smart. Street smarts. How much, yes, somebody got that reference, woo! Okay, so how much is printing going to cost? What about shipping? Because when you buy the books, you gotta ship them to everybody, and that's expensive too, so don't forget to factor that in. Calculate all of this ahead of time, and remember to plan for emergencies, because stuff happens sometimes. So factoring in an emergency buffer into your budget will save your butt if things go wrong during production. I have heard so many Kickstarter horror stories of people who didn't set their goal high enough for what they had planned to ship out, and then they had to dip into their own funds, into the thousands of dollars to actually make sure that their stuff got made and they didn't have a bunch of people filing for a lawsuit. So be careful with money, because people are sensitive about it. Kickstarter basics. Timing is everything. Running a campaign right before Christmas is probably not a good idea, because everybody's spending their money on Christmas presents. No one's going to have extra money to throw around for a Kickstarter. Also, tax stuff, which is fun. If you don't spend your raised funds from a Kickstarter before the end of the year, you have to pay income taxes on them. So that'll eat a big chunk of your profits that you don't necessarily need to pay to the government. So don't run a Kickstarter in September or December unless you can reliably spend all that money before the year is up and you can say, hey, this wasn't income, I spent it to buy books. Promote yourself, promote yourself, promote yourself. Use all those tips I already gave you and use them for your Kickstarter to get people to buy your new books that you're gonna get. Start hyping up your Kickstarter like 6 months in advance, because that way, so that everyone knows. Start hyping up your Kickstarter. Use everything in your arsenal to promote it. I said don't be annoying. Running a Kickstarter is when you get to be annoying. That's when you're posting about, hey, look at my Kickstarter like 5 times a day. Like, hey, have you guys heard about my Kickstarter? Hey, wow, look at this cool thing I just made for my Kickstarter. Hey, look, here's my Kickstarter. Give me money. Only 5 more days left in the Kickstarter. Make sure you get your thing. That's when you want to be annoying because you're on a time limit. Because Kickstarters generally only run about 30 to 60 days. So you want to make sure that people see it. Okay, more tips. Have a variety of price points because some people are made of money and they can just shower you with their hundreds of dollar bills, but most people are not like that, unfortunately, because capitalism. So some people will only be able to pay you a few bucks, but some might be willing to pitch in much more. So just make sure that if somebody wants to throw you their money, give them that opportunity. So I know a lot of people will do like big tiers, like several $100s, and say, if you pay this much on the Kickstarter, I will put you in the comic. That's the kind of stuff that people will be like, hey, I have money, I will pay money for this. And so like Joe Schmo off the street might not have money for that, but somebody might, and somebody who really likes your comic might want to be immortalized into it. So just make sure you have a little something for everybody. This is a tip from my life experience. Don't ship anything smaller than your book. The first physical thing you mail out, the cheapest physical tier that you have to mail, should be your book. If you do something dumb, like say ship out some art card packs, and then it's like for $5 you get a set of art cards that I have to mail you, and then 3 people from Australia buy them, and then you have to pay $15 to ship it when those people only paid you $5 for the cards. That's like several dollars you lose from your little college wallet that doesn't have any money. Don't be like me. Don't ship things unless it's your book or more. Digital rewards, like an ebook, you're gonna have to make it anyway when you send your comic to the printer. Just pay like $10 for it. Just say like $10 you get the ebook. And I'm not gonna ship you anything. You can get the digital file. I don't have to ship you anything. I don't have to pay for shipping. It costs nothing for me to produce, and then everyone who pays for that, that's $10 you can use to spend on producing your webcomic. It's free. Also, be a good communicator. Kickstarters are prone to delays and mishaps, but most people who support it will be understanding and patient as long as you keep them updated, because people want to know where their money's at. So it's like, if it takes you 5 years to get your stuff printed, people are going to start asking you for refunds, and I have heard horror stories about this happening. Don't be that person. Be responsible. Here are some more resources for information about crowdfunding. Iron Circus Comics has 2 PDFs that I have, both of them. I highly recommend them. So they have Let's Print a Comic and Let's Kickstart a Comic. These are PDFs you can buy on their website. These cover absolutely everything you need to know. These are not free. I think one of them is $5 and one of them is $8, but they are like 40 pages each, and it is everything you need to know. Highly recommend it. Webcomic Alliance, again, I mentioned them in my last panel, but they have a lot of information and articles specifically about crowdfunding that's worth checking out. Print Ninja is a printer overseas that does a lot of comic and graphic novel and board game printing, and they have a series of articles about publishing tips. So like a series of guides of how to print and crowdfund comics, books, etc., etc. And then also just Google. Google is your friend, because a lot of general Kickstarter tips, even if it's not specific to comics, will apply to you. So like comics are not special. If it works for somebody else's Kickstarter, it's like good. There's best practice for Kickstarter. And so if you find a tip on another website, it's probably going to be applicable to your situation. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. It is time to wrap up. So you are now armed with the knowledge to promote and sell your comics. So go forth, friends, and make comics. I hope you enjoyed the panel. One more time, I'll do questions after this, but if you want it, here's my comic. Go read it. This is my shameless self-plug. You can take a picture of this slide and then you can go home and read my comic and cry about my sad boys. But yes, we have about 4 minutes now until I get kicked out of this room. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, that's several. If I don't get to all of you guys, I will hang out outside and we can talk shop, but I saw your hand first.
Oh yeah, as far as like the hosting side of things, like the way that your comics on the website, are you just using the WordPress?
Yes, I use WordPress. So WordPress has a lot of good themes for webcomics. It's a little wonkadoodle because sometimes it takes up a lot of space on your host, but it's pretty easy. I am famous for destroying websites. I did have to restart my website 4 times before I got the WordPress to work, but it works. So that is what I do, yes. I think that is probably the easiest method. Grawlix is another one. Grawlix is another popular one that people use. The issue with that one is that the person who made it is no longer updating it. So if you use it, you kind of have to go into it understanding that risk of if it breaks, then the person's not going to be able to fix it.
And that's the Comic Press plugin?
Yeah, so I use Comic Press. There's also Inkblot and I think Comic Easel. So those are all applicable ones. So generally, a good thing to do. If you see a webcomic you like, scroll down to the very bottom in the footer. It usually has information about what theme they're using, especially if it's WordPress.
Something to do with yours.
Oh, so you have read my comic, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, you're my favorite. Okay, next.
What's a good size of your comics is like original one? Like original size, like you size it?
Okay, so that's a good question. If you are planning on printing your webcomic, make sure that you are drawing it big enough for print before you ever start anything. So 300 DPI, dots per inch, is the bare minimum for printing your comics and having them look good. What I do is I work at 300 DPI and I also work with a canvas that is 2 times the size it needs to be. So my comics, when I print it, it's gonna be like 6 by 9. But I draw at 11 by 17. So I draw super big at a high resolution, and then when it's time to go, I just shrink them down. But yeah, so that's good for drawing, but please do not post an 11 by 17, like it's like 2,000 by 3,000 something pixels on your website. That's gonna load real slow. So when you export out of whatever program you're using, it will let you set the size. You do like export for web on both Photoshop and Clip Studio, and you can select the size. My website, I do like 840 across, and I just keep that consistent size. So anything that gets posted on my website is under 1,000 pixels because it's nice, it loads quickly, but you want to make sure that you still have those big files so that you can print them later, and then also you can reuse those panels for high res. That's another thing that my Patreon folks get is I upload the full size pages so you can zoom in super small and see where I cheated my way through certain things. I think we got time for one more before I have to vacate you.
Should you make a separate social media account for the comic?
I would not recommend that unless you don't have one specifically for your art.
Okay, because I just had my personal one and I didn't know.
Okay, yeah, so what I would do is if you are serious about your art, make yourself a separate Instagram account. Twitter is less necessary. For Instagram especially though, I would definitely, if you are serious about this, make an account only for posting art because people who want to follow artists are not interested in pictures of food usually. So I would make one specifically for art, post art there, post your webcomic there, so it's all in one place.
Okay. No problem.
Okay, I gotta go, but like I said, I will be hanging out outside. Just look for the one with the obnoxious ears. I will be outside if you guys want to talk shop. I'll be here for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you enjoyed the panel. I hope you learned something, and I will see you guys later. Read my comic.